Hey everybody, this is Ken here, and here I want to give you guys a couple of updates about myself. So, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm currently in grad school right now studying statistics with a concentration in data science for my master's at Cal State East Bay, which is another school in the CSU system. And for those of you who've watched my previous videos, you might find it a bit odd or interesting that I went from being an applied math major to being a stats major. So before I get into some of the topics that I do want to talk about, I thought I'd probably give you a general gist as to kind of why I made that transition from being applied math major to an MS statistics degree. So I guess a lot of it goes back to the fact that while I did enjoy my time as an applied math major at San Jose State, I did feel that other than a couple of classes that I did genuinely enjoy that were particularly relevant to, I guess, certain fields of interest that I do have in mind, whether it's data analysis or data science, I did feel that the program by and large felt a bit scattered, in that while you do learn about different areas of the applied mathematics field, you're not really getting a particular focus in any particular field. I mean, on one minute you're learning about partial differential equations, another you're learning a little bit about chaos theory, and then another you're doing complex variables or combinatorics. It's a really scattershot view of applied mathematics, which in some cases loads you with a lot of theory that a lot of which can't quite be translated into a real world setting or translate into actual applicable job related skills. So unless you're aiming to get your master's in applied mathematics or just mathematics in general, or just aiming for the PhD route, or even going to the research sector, you're probably not going to find much of the content in the applied math degree useful, which is why I recommended in my previous video where I talked about my life as a SJSU applied math major, why I suggested that people should really take on a minor to complement their major. As the applied math major by itself is kind of, I'll be honest, it is fun, but it's kind of weak, as it lacks a lot of the raw technical skills that are really important to be really excelling in not just in the applied mathematics field, but to really have the skills needed in this job market right now. From what I understand, a lot of the tech-related jobs nowadays seem to rely a lot on coding, and for the most part. So knowing a bit like a programming language, or even just like knowing some basic computer science theory, is pretty much a must in this day and age. As while a computer science minor doesn't quite give you that, as you do kind of have to take it on yourself to continue to educate yourself in programming and all that stuff. It does help you give you that technical edge that does kind of enhance your learning experience. And it's something that I feel the math program at SJSU does kind of struggle a little bit, as coding skills are more or less not as heavily emphasized, in the applied math degree. So if you're trying to get a job right away, you might find that it's very difficult for you to be competitive unless you have some significant skills that you can bring to the table. And one of them is coding, which is pretty much a must, as a lot of data analysis or even a lot of computing that's done in the industry relies and solely on a lot of programming, not only because it's fast and efficient, but also it's because a lot of what powers the 21st century is programming and software and all this stuff. So it's really much a must to really have, especially just having a minor to complement your applied math major. And so just coming from that, while I did in some ways had a somewhat pretty decent, education at San Jose State, I didn't really feel connected to a lot of what I was learning as an applied math major, as I think not only was I more interested in more of I guess the more nonprofit world, but I was also developing a much more intense interest with statistics later on at my time at San Jose State. A lot of which came when I took this wonderful statistics class during my last semester at San Jose State. I think it was It was Applied Probability and Statistics 2, which is this calculus-based statistics that where you learn about hypothesis testing, you learn about linear regression, logistic regression, and ANOVA, all these wonderful tools that are used by statisticians. And it's one of those classes that ended up just feeling motivated. I was learning something that was pretty applicable, that was pretty universal, and is something that I could see a lot of potential with, especially in regards to career opportunities. As you look around us, everyone could use some statistics. I mean, whether it's in polling or survey design or conducting research studies for a biotech company. I mean, everywhere statistics is needed. Not to mention with the rise of data science, machine learning, there comes a need for statisticians to provide that math statistical background to really sort of back up all these algorithms that are designed that for machine learning or AI purposes that we all take for granted. So there's a lot of applicability with that. And it was that applicability that really drew me to statistics, not just because of how much I was able to quickly see how applicable it is, but also just from a career standpoint, I felt that it would really broaden my horizons than what I had at the time, which was mostly just a mishmash of different areas of applied mathematics with a computer science minor on top, which it does help me stand out a little bit, but career-wise, I felt opportunities for me were a little bit limited. And I wanted to branch out beyond just being sort of pigeonholed into the software engineering route, which some of my own colleagues have kind of been ended up doing for the most part after they graduate with their applied math degree. And for me, I just wanted to do something different. So after all that inspiration that I got from just that statistics class, I started to really think hard about applying for a statistics program. So I searched around. I ended up finding the MS Statistics program, the data science concentration program at CSU East Bay. I applied there, and now I'm currently a student there at CSU East Bay. I'm expected to graduate around 2023, spring 2023. So that's a year from now. And so here I am. Which brings me to, I guess, a couple things that I do want to talk about in this video, other than that basic introduction as to kind of why I got into the stats program. So, as one thing I want to talk about in this video is about just some thoughts I have about applying for the MS in Statistics major at CSU East Bay. While I'm doing the data science concentration, which means that I may not be able to provide you much understanding as to other concentrations in the statistics major, as there's not only data science concentration, you also have actuarial science, actuarial statistics, I think that's what it's called. There's also mathematical statistics and other concentrations, as well as biostats, which has the same core courses as all the other MS Statistics major, but where they differ is when it comes to more of the elective courses that you get to take. But other than that, they generally have the same level of requirements. So while I may not be able to touch on the others, but I think I know more and enough to really focus on the overall degree in general. So the general requirements and the general core courses. To start off, let's start by looking at applying to the stats program, as the details for doing so are on the CSU website, which I'll put down in the video description. So as for applying to enroll in the spring, you have to apply, say, starting around August or September of the previous year. So, for example, spring 2021, you want to apply in August 2020, or you're applying for fall 2021, you want to apply around November 2020 or so, which is generally the general timeline where applications are open for that particular semester, which I'm not certain of, as sometimes dates can change, so always check out the CSU East Bay website for that, which again is linked in the description. You may also want to, before really watching the rest of this video, you also want to check out the CSU East Bay stats degree programs that are offered by the Department of Statistics and Biostatistics at CSU East Bay, so you can get a better sense of the graduate programs, as well as the general requirements that I'll be referring to quite a lot throughout this video and referencing, as well as get a picture of which program you want to do, or which concentration you want to do, or whether you want to do biostats or statistics. And then when you do statistics, if you want to do data science, actuarial statistics, mathematical statistics, or whatever concentration you want to do. So figure that out first before you watch the rest of this video, as I'll be referencing, I guess, some of the requirements that are mentioned on the CSU East Bay website. So just make sure you go through that, as I'm not really going to go over them in this video, as I assume that you have to understand that and you have an idea of, I guess, how to apply for this program. So with that said, I'm going to move on and talk about a couple of things that I recommend or want to point out, so you get a sense of the program and also max out your chances of getting through the application process and potentially getting yourself. Number 1, you might want to consider taking up to Calculus 3 or Multivariable Calculus, which is typically the final part of the calculus series for undergraduates that involves learning about calculus in 3D space, triple integrals, double integrals, Stokes' theorem, all that stuff. And for those of you who are probably hearing me saying this, you might find it tough to think about, as the requirements on CSU East Bay website, particularly for the MS Statistics degrees or the Biostats degree, they all suggest that you only need up to Calculus 2, which is where you learn about the Taylor series, or even about power series and trig substitution, all that stuff. And some brief references to convergence, integration by parts, and all these topics. So, in other words, the CSU East Bay website only says that you need up to Calculus 2, up to that point. While it's quite true that you only need up to Calculus 2 at that point, I do think that it really helps to have that background, that strong calculus background, which you can obtain specifically by taking up to Calculus 3, which is not required, but I highly recommend. As based on my experiences during my first full semester at CSU East Bay last fall, we did have to dive into a couple of topics that weren't in Calculus 2 but were in Calculus 3, namely the double integrals, I think we did triple integrals, if I got that right, and there's also partial derivatives, and there's also references to the Jacobian, which are topics that are typically available in Multivariable Calculus 3. While the calculus in general for probability and statistical theory, the first set of courses that you'd have to take in your first full semester, while those courses didn't have too much calculus in them, as it was mostly just doing basic integrals and working some basic summations and power series, I did remember having to do a couple of integrated parts a couple of times and some double integrals, which, while the professors that I've had were nice enough to accommodate and really help out those that weren't exposed to these concepts before, it would help, I think, personally in my opinion, that it would help your math maturity a lot more to consider taking Calculus 3 before you apply to the MS Statistics program at CSU East Bay. As calculus isn't really the only major component of stats education you should worry about, as there's also programming, there's learning about regression, and all these different topics that they do involve calc, but they involve other skills that you need to develop in order to be able to succeed in MS Statistics program, or they call things like that. So it helps to master the calculus part well enough, so that way you can spend more of your energy focusing on other parts of the stats program or the stats curriculum that you're going to be learning. As if there's one thing I'm going to repeat often throughout this video, you do not want to fall behind, especially with the calc part, which is, while it's not too prevalent in a lot of the stats courses, it does play a significant role in some of the material that you learn in the program. So it's really important that you have that math maturity on hand. So if you can, do take up to multivariable calculus, as it'll give you an advantage in terms of your math background, and it really helps give you that extra practice needed to master the calculus part of statistics. So with that said, let's move on to number 2. So number 2, I wanted to make some comments regarding one of the requirements on the Cal State East Bay website that talked about how in order to get into the stats program, you only need, other than just up to Calc 2, you also need a bachelor's degree or equivalent in general, which is pretty much standard fare for any grad program out there. But I wanted to pay more particular attention to this, as unlike most stats programs that I've come across in my own lifetime, this CSU East Bay program is a lot more accommodating to non-stats majors or anyone without a math, CS, or stats background. So you can have people that are, say, economics majors or English majors, psychology majors be in this program. So thus, it doesn't quite matter what you get your bachelor's degree in, as long as for your course load, you have Calc 1 and 2 down, which is on paper though, and once you meet all those 3 requirements, you're great. You're all set. On a personal level, while it does say that's all the requirements there is in regards to just getting into the program, I feel that on one hand, it is pretty difficult to get the program if you don't have a math research background or programming language background or any other courses or experiences the MS Statistics website suggests could help increase your chances of getting in. And this is not to say that non-math majors or non-technical majors can't succeed here. They can. It just takes a lot of hard work to really catch up with what's thrown here, especially if math isn't your strong suit. As since this program is designed to accommodate all backgrounds, even those that are non-technical, it's going to sometimes feel as if they're just throwing so much catching up for you in terms of math background. As remember, this is a stats program, so while it is a distinctive field compared to math, there's a hefty amount of math background that you kind of need to understand before you get to stats. So, I mean, to illustrate this, let's talk about Stats 620, which is the first general course in probability and statistical theory. As I remember taking that class, we were first introduced some basic combinatorics. So you're talking about permutations, combinations, learning ways to count given certain constraints, which was pretty overwhelming for a lot of students that I've met in that class, especially since combinatorics is a really specific branch of math that requires a different way of thinking and approaching compared to, say, algebra or calculus. So for anyone who's doesn't have a math background or isn't really experienced with math, they will struggle significantly, as we only spent 1 chapter on it, and then subsequent chapters after that, we barely reference combinatorics. So you're kind of, in a sense, going through like a crash course in some of the basic math concepts you need to be able to understand the theory behind the material that's taught. So it's a lot of just, sometimes it can feel rushed at times. So it's important that if you're not a math major or not really technical major, that you really make sure that you're on top of your coursework. Perhaps maybe form a study group, you have trouble just learning the material or you need help, go to office hours, and so on. Whatever it takes to make sure that you stay on top of the material you're learning, so that way you don't fall behind. So bottom line is, as long as you got the basic requirements down, just a bachelor's degree, essentially equivalent to Calculus 1 and 2, you pretty much met the requirements. And know that while you've met the requirements, especially if you're not experienced with math, you do have to note that despite what the requirements say, it may be an uphill battle for you that you may have to get through, especially if you don't have a math background. which is tough, but it's not impossible to get over. So just want to put that out there. Okay, I think number 3 is that when it comes to supplemental application, which isn't quite mentioned on the CSU East Bay website right now, but when it comes to supplementary application, after you submit your application for the MS Statistics program at CSU East Bay, there is, for any of you who's wondering, there's actually a call for a personal statement and GREs, or 3 letters of recommendations, which is something that I didn't discover until after I applied and I emailed the Department of Statistics and Biostatistics. So from what I understand, based on how it works, is that CSU East Bay has some supplementary applications, which isn't, from what I understand when I did the application process, wasn't quite mentioned in the application process that I did through Cal State Apply. And while it's not explicitly listed, the requirement is that after you submit your application, you need to submit your statement of purpose to the Department of Statistics and Biostatistics. The contact info for that department, which I'll put down in the description, or in case they move the link or somehow, just look up Department of Statistics and Biostatistics at CSU East Bay to find them. So contact them and just find out more about that and all that. But anyway, so for supplementary application, you need to submit your statement of purpose and email them to the Department of Stats and Biostats. So just a quick review. A statement of purpose is a type of essay where you describe your career aspirations in the future and how the Master's Statistics program will help you get there, what it means to you. It's not like the personal statement, as some schools may ask of you, in that it doesn't focus on your personal story per se, but more about your career goals and aspirations. So it's a lot more technical and career-oriented than, say, a personal statement. So just want to put that out there. And the statement of purpose is pretty much is required of all applicants to the Master's in Statistics program, especially when I applied. And once you get that statement of purpose, after that, there's a second part to the supplementary application that you have to do. That is, for that second part, you have 2 options. You got submitting GRE scores or get 3 letters of recommendations. Both of which I think to my knowledge, when I did it, I submitted it by email got them submitted by email to the Department of Stats and Biostats. So for the GRE, if you're doing that option of doing your GRE, you ideally, this is my recommendation, you ideally want to have done your GRE before you apply and give yourself. So for GRE, you ideally want to have done it before you apply. You may want to give yourself at least 1 to 3 months to study for it prior to taking the GRE, as it's a pretty intensive test that tests on content that you don't quite see on the SAT. And it's more about your quick thinking skills. So while it's not too significant, I don't think that CSU East Bay is going to be impacted for the MS Stats degree for any time soon. But it's still worth studying well for it and doing your best on it. Also, try to apply early as possible, as GREs are not only expensive, but also slots easily fill up. So you may want to leave time to set up an appointment for it as early as possible. So that's the option. That's all I have in regards to thoughts about the GRE option for that second part of the supplementary application. For that other option, where in case you do not want to do the GRE, what you can do is to submit 3 letters of recommendations. Not hard requirements, but there's no hard requirements around the nature of these letter recommendations, but ideally they should be from people that you've worked with or in some professional capacity. So it could be a professor that you've had, a boss, or a community leader, or anyone that you've worked with in some capacity or another. And as for these letters of recommendations, they all have to be submitted separately by the person writing them to the Department of Statistics and Biostatistics as soon as possible by email before the deadline of the college of your application to the stats program. So if you do struggle with this part and you do want to do this part, a good way to plan is to first identify at least 3 to 4 people that you know will write for you, who you had a good relationship with, and who are you confident feel will write you a letter of recommendation, a good one, or a strong one, I believe, per se. At least contact your contacts for like a letter of recs at least a month or 2 before you do your application and submit it. And then once you do that and check if they're able to write one, if they are, good. Perhaps give them a whole month to write one, a letter of recommendation, as you have to remember that I can imagine that not all of your contacts will have all the free time in the world to write one. So do at least give them a month or 2 notice to when it comes to writing one, right? And then once you get through the process of writing one, follow up with your contacts, help them accordingly, and guide them on where to submit the letter of recommendation, which again is by emailing separately to the Department of Statistics and Biostatistics, which is what I did at the time. I think maybe requirements have changed now, but you can always check in with the Department of Statistics and Biostatistics to see if that still holds true or if there are other ways in which you go about submitting those letters of recommendations. As personally for me, I submitted both my GRE scores and my 3 letters of recommendations to the Department of Statistics and Biostatistics, which isn't necessary, but is something that I did, as at the time I was pretty insecure about the strength of my application to the MS Statistics program. So I just threw everything at them. Not to mention, I did have a math background, so I met a lot of the suggestions that they had that would increase the chances of my application being accepted. So a lot of just overdoing stuff that I did to get in, which I ended up being, otherwise I wouldn't be here. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that when it comes to the supplementary application, just to sum it all up, what you have to do is get a statement of purpose in, and then once you get that done, for your second option, you can either submit a GRE or you can do 3 letters of recommendations from 3 people, ideally professional references of some kind. And all of those things, the statement of purpose, GREs, and letter of recommendations, all got to be submitted to the Department of Statistics and Biostatistics by email. For the letter of recommendations, it's got to be submitted separately by the people writing them, the people that you contact to write them. So that's general summary of that. And with that said, let's move on to, I guess, the last thing that I think that people should know about when it comes to the application process and, I guess, getting in. So the last thing I think is probably pretty standard advice, but it's probably one that people forget, and that is check your emails often for updates on what to do in order to be fully enrolled into the CSU East Bay program. As while you may have gone through the requirements for the MS Statistics program and applying to it, you also get to requirements on just being a grad student at CSU East Bay. As you might want to check updates for an orientation, meeting the advisor for the program, for the stats program, so you can figure out how to plan out your semesters accordingly so you can graduate on time. And you also want to consider, getting registered for classes. And if you need to, maybe, talk to the Department of Statistics and Biostatistics further to figure out, I guess, more about the program and maybe perhaps what you can do to get started. So that way, by the time you hit your first semester, you pretty much got all you need done over with in order to hit the ground running. And then on top of that, perhaps get through some requirements that the school in general is asking of anyone applying to the school. So there's things such as sexual harassment training, which every student has to get through in order to be enrolled in the program usually get done at least by halfway through their first semester, or maybe submit their COVID vaccine or immunization records, or whatever that may be. All these requirements that don't necessarily relate to the stats program, but more about the general requirements for any student enrolled at CSU East Bay. So make sure you check on your emails, contact your major advisors, contact the school if you need to, just to make sure that you're on top of this. So that way you can get them all done and over with. So that way you can fully just focus on applying for classes and just getting off to a good start for your first full semester and beyond at CSU East Bay. So anyway, this is a pretty long video, so I'm going to stop right here and I'll say thank you all for watching. If you really have any questions or comments, feel free to comment down below. Just know that I'm going to be pretty busy for the next couple of weeks and months to come, so I may not get to all of them, but I'll do my best to do so. And with that said, have a great day, and hope you all stay tuned for the next video, if I do make one. So take care.